the Statutory Licensing Committee being held under the Local Authorities Coronavirus Meetings Wales Regulations 2020. It's not practical for this meeting to be broadcast live. However, a recording of this meeting will be made available as soon as possible after the meeting has concluded. We have not had any requests to hold the meeting in Welsh language, and so it will be conducted in English only today. Please can members use the chat bar to indicate when you want to speak, and remember to keep your microphone muted when you're not talking. Moving on the agenda, we'll go to agenda item 1, which is attendance and apologies. Do you have any apologies, Chris?
Just apologies from Councillor Cathy Evans, Chair.
Thank you. I go to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. I'll ask now Claire Lacey, our solicitor, do we have any advice for members?
Thank you, Chair. Members, you're aware that you need to declare if you have any personal or prejudicial interest. Members, if you remember, a personal interest relates to issues where you or a close personal associate may have some link to a matter under discussion. However, as always, it's a matter for yourselves as to whether you have such interests. And if you do so, please declare now.
I probably got one for the fire. Normally you consult with the fire on a lot of these. And when we get on to the next one, I'm involved. My brother runs a bus company, Village and Valleys, doing school runs. So if I declare that now as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Evans. Anybody else? Any other members got any interest to declare? No? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 3, which are minutes of the Statutory Licensing Committee from the 25th second, and that's on pages 3 to 6. Right, members, do we agree to note? Yes. Anybody against? No? Okay then, thank you. We move straight into agenda item number 4, which is minutes of the previous listed hearings, which is on pages 7 to 34. You all had a chance to look at these beforehand? Right, here then, if everybody's happy, can I remember you as just remind you, so please, if you're not.
Can we ask people to mute, because I can't.
Yeah, just know if people could put their microphones on mute. There's a lot of feedback then. So that's great. I'll just go over that again then. Agenda item 4, minutes of the previous licensing hearings, pages 7 to 34. Right, do we agree to note? Okay, anybody against? No? Okay then, we go to agenda item 5, which is the workload update report, quarters 3 and 4. This is on pages 35 to 46. I'll hand over now to Claire Howells, the team manager for licensing and trading standards, and she'll now present a report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. Bear with me. And can someone just confirm that they can see my screen for me, please?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Thank you. So the first report that I'm presenting to you today is a workload update relating to quarters 3 and quarters 4 of the 2020-2021 period. The purpose of this report is to update the committee on the work undertaken by the licensing team in relation to matters falling to Statutory Licensing Committee, that being the Licensing Act 2003 and the Gambling Act 2005. In relation to Licensing Act 2003, it is worth noting that for the majority of this reporting period, premises licensed for the consumption of alcohol on the premises have been required to close following the implementation of Tier 4 restrictions on the 19th of December 2020. However, the coronavirus regulations allowed for businesses to diversify from their normal operation and provide a takeaway and delivery service. However, only a small minority of licensed premises in the area chose to diversify in this way. During the reporting period, there was 5 complaints received relating to premises licensed to sell alcohol. 1 relating to a premises being able to trade following the premises license being revoked, which I'll come on to shortly, and the other in relation to alcohol being sold online without the required license. All complaints received are dealt with accordingly. The committee has been previously advised that following the issue of a prohibition notice back in May, June of last year, that on the 3rd of September 2020, the licensing panel met to determine an application made to review the premises license of a premises following identification of breaches of coronavirus regulations. The review provided evidence that on 4 separate occasions during May and June 2020, food and alcohol was provided to customers and consumed on the premises contrary to regulations that were in place at the time. The licensing panel, as you've been previously made aware, made the decision to revoke the license, and a subsequent appeal against the decision was made, and the matter was subject to an appeal hearing in Newport Magistrates Court in March 2021. The case was heard before a district judge who heard the evidence put before him, but in light of further evidence provided, the matter was adjourned until the 28th of April. At the time of writing this report, recent communication had been received that a further adjournment was needed due to the unavailability on the date by the district judge. We have since been notified that the matter is due to be presented to the district judge again on the 26th of May. So once we go through that process, an update will be provided at the next licensing committee. In relation to gambling, again, all premises licensed under the provisions of the Gambling Act 2005 have been required to close under Welsh Government Tier 4 restrictions. So there's been no complaints made in relation to gambling premises during the reporting period. If we can now turn to overall work results, and you will have an activity report attached as Appendix A to the paperwork. We've previously reported that during the first half of the year, the programme of inspections in place had been paused in response to the coronavirus pandemic. However, it is noted on the activity report that during the last 2 quarters of the year, officers in the team have worked towards achieving set targets where possible. It has not been possible to meet certain targets due to the forced closure of alcohol licensed premises and premises licensed to provide facilities for gambling. You will note that the number of service requests dealt with by the team in relation to providing business advice has continued to see an increase, and this is evidenced in the report. During the reporting period, time and resources have continued to be directed towards communicating advice to the various sectors of the trade via mail merges, pub watch groups, social media releases, and our website. This is unable to be accounted for in the activity report. Officers have continued to work from home and have continued to adapt procedures in place for accepting and processing applications. In terms of policy, a separate report will be presented to you shortly in relation to the statutory review of the Gambling Act policy. There has been no complaints made against service in relation to matters that need reporting to Statutory Licensing Committee during this period. It is therefore recommended that the Licensing Committee note and comment on the contents of this report and note the activity report for the period October 2020 to March 2021. Thank you, Chair. Would anyone like me to refer and share the activity report on screen, or is everyone happy that they've had significant time to view it?
Yeah, I'm quite happy. We've all read it. I can see Councillor Karen's got his hand up. So thanks, Claire, for the comprehensive report.
No problem.
Councillor, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, it is actually about the activity report. Private hire Hackney carriage. I'm looking at visits and inspections 71 and defects found 21. That seems a particularly high figure, around about 30%.
That could be minor defects. It could be a case of they haven't got the smoking signage displayed. It could be perhaps that the operator signage is missing. Any defects found will be dealt with and will be checked to ensure compliance then going forward. It doesn't mean mechanical defects. It could be policy defects.
Yeah, no, I understand that. It just does seem a particularly high number. Is that usual or like?
We do find defects when we go out, and this is one of the reasons why we have a out there presence, because we're ensuring public safety at the end of the day. Again, the message was work from home, so officers weren't out and about there as much as they might usually be, and obviously things like that are picked up on them by the trade.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering more than anything if it was to do with the coronavirus, in the sense that, some of these people weren't working very much, and so consequently, they'd allow things to slide. But you think not? That's fine.
It could be for a wide variety of reasons. Unfortunately, I haven't got a breakdown of the defects with me today. But yeah, like I said, it could be, it could be we could have stopped a vehicle and they didn't have their badge with them, which is a policy condition. So then it would be recorded as a defect.
Okay.
If I could just possibly come in there, if that's okay. I mean, obviously, I and my colleague Joe have done most of the inspections, so I can probably come in here. The main thing that people don't seem to comply with is having their license number on their first aid kits. So that's listed as a defect, but it's not. They have the first aid kit, it just doesn't identify their vehicle. So it is something maybe hasn't been picked up in the past, but something we're actively looking at now. So that's probably the majority of the defects that are listed in the report, if that helps.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Robin.
thank you. That's great, Rob.
Thanks, Robin. Members, any other questions? No, everybody's happy. Okay, then the recommendations are on page 38 of your agenda. I now invite members to state whether they wish to vote for, against, or abstain. Geraint Thomas, is he here?
I am, Chair.
Rightio. Right, Geraint Thomas, Senior Business Support Officer. Could you please call out each member's name?
Okay, thank you, Chair. If I can start with Councillor Karen, please.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor Haller.
For.
Councillor Jenkins.
For.
Councillor Overton.
For.
Councillor Parish.
For.
And Councillor Powell.
For.
Thank you. Just double check. I don't think Councillor Chu is in the meeting. Bear with me. Yeah, that's it. It's unanimous, Chair.
Okay, thanks a lot, Geraint. Right then, we move on now to agenda item 6, which is review of Council's statement of gambling principles, which is on pages 47 to 126. I now hand you over to Robin Gray, who's the Senior Licensing Officer, who will now present his report. Over to you, Robin.
Great, thank you very much. I'll just share my screen and bring up the report, so we can refer to that if needed. But I'll just summarise it rather than reading through the full report, because I'm sure everybody's had the opportunity to look through it prior to the meeting. So the background to the report is that the Gambling Act 2005 requires that the Council, in its role as the licensing authority, prepares and publishes a statement of principles that it proposes to apply in exercising its functions under the Act during each successive period of 3 years. The period that the current statement of principles covers began in January 2019, and we must therefore prepare a statement that will be published for the next 3-year period beginning on 31st of January 2022. The current statement of principles complies with the statutory requirements, and all the items that are required to be included in the statements are there. And it's also been effective in guiding officers, members, applicants, licence holders and the public in understanding the Council's expectations and how it will apply its discretions and use its powers under the Act. There have also not been any legislative changes or amendments to the Gambling Commission's guidance that affect the principles set out in the statements, and it's therefore not really proposed to really change any of the principles set out in the statement. Additionally, the government is currently undertaking a review of the Gambling Act 2005 to ensure that it's fit for purpose within the digital age. The Act came into effect in 2007, and there's been a large expansion in online gambling facilities since that time. So the government therefore wants to ensure that the regulatory framework can still effectively protect children and other vulnerable people, whilst also preventing gambling related crime and ensuring that gambling is fair and open. We're expecting white paper later this year, and that may lead to legislative changes, and they may then may require that we change our statement of principles. So for the moment, it's not proposed that we greatly change our statement of principles, but it is something that we have to review to meet our statutory obligation. So the review must be undertaken, the new policy in place before or by the 31st of January 2022. Even if the government does introduce changes to the legislation that requires us to review the statement of principles, we can still review our policy within the 3-year period. It's not like set in stone for 3 years. So it may be necessary for us in a year's time or so to look to review it again. But for the moment, the draft statement of principles, which really the only updates are to sort of dates, data, and references. The draft is attached as Appendix A to the report. Prior to determining our statement of principles, we are required to consult, and the process is set out within, or the proposed process is set out within paragraph 4.8 of the report. So I'll just refer to that. So the proposal is that we consult for 12 weeks and we give formal notification to the Chief Officer of Police as required to do that under the Act. It's also proposed that we give written notification of the consultation to responsible authorities under the Act and also local gambling businesses, including the head offices where appropriate. We propose giving formal consultation or undertaking formal consultation by the local authority website, so the council website. So that will allow residents, community groups, businesses and others to respond. We'll also consult with other departments in respect of local risk assessments. And finally, it's proposed that we'll undertake a social media campaign and use other avenues to publicise the consultation. Obviously, members may wish to comment on the proposed consultation process and suggest other things we should do and other consultees if they deem appropriate. So section 4.9 of the report just outlines the proposed timeline for the review of the statement of principles and kind of working from the end upwards. So the policy needs to be in place, or the revised statement of principles needs to be in place by the 31st of January. We need to publicise it for at least a month beforehand. So it's proposed that we kind of do that in November. And then prior to that, it will need to be adopted by full council. Committee will obviously have view of the final policy before it goes to full council, and then we're proposing that the consultation takes place between May and August this year, so that will kind of fit it into the timeline to ensure that it gets to full council in October, ready for implementation in January 2022. So that's really the purpose of the report, just to bring the draft policy before the committee. As I say, there's no proposed major changes to the policy, but obviously the committee need to give approval to it prior to it going to consultation. So I'll just move to the recommendations now, and those are that the committee agree the draft statement of principles for the period 2022 to 2025, subject to any amendments that the committee may wish to make here today. And secondly, that the committee agreed to the proposed timescales and process for consulting on the draft statement of principles for the period of 2022 to 2025. Okay, and that's the report, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Members, any questions? No questions. Okay, then the recommendations are on page 51. I'll now invite members to state whether they wish to vote for, against, or abstain. Once again, I'll call on Geraint Thomas, the Senior Business Support Officer, to call out each member's name. Geraint?
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with Councillor Karen, please.
Agreed.
Councillor Davis?
Agreed.
Councillor Evans?
Agreed.
Councillor Haller?
Agreed.
Councillor Jenkins?
Agreed.
Councillor Overton?
Agreed.
Councillor Parish?
Agreed.
And Councillor Powell?
Agreed.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Geraint. Thank you, members. So we go on to agenda item 7, which is the date of the next meeting. Apparently, the date of the next meeting is due to take place, which will be confirmed at a later date. Okay. We'll move on now to agenda item 8, which is exclusion of the press and public. So just going to read out a statement a second. So members need to agree to the exclusion of the press and public from the meeting as presentations and meeting papers are not for publication, because in accordance with paragraphs 12 and 14 of Part 4 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended by the Access to Information Variation Order Wales 2007, it contains information about a particular individual and information related to the financial and business affairs of a particular persons, including the council, and in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemptions outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Right, members, do we agree to the exclusion of press and public? Any against? Okay. Right, I'll now close the meeting to the public. Garen, can you stop recording, please? Or Chris?
Yeah, no problem, Chair. I've stopped that now.